Well, hello, everybody. Look who it is. It is the lady herself. There she is, Reba Rambo. And of course, then we have an amazing talent himself, Tim Dillinger, who is just a great friend, fan, but he also works and travels and does a lot of stuff in the industry himself. But he's been a lifelong fan of Reba's. I hate calling them fans, but he's a friend, a comrade, a son to her, and family. Yeah. And we just thought we would get together. I mean, I know all of you, many of you who watch this, hopefully you got to watch Reba talk and share with another incredible vocalist and a legend herself, the lovely Crystal Lewis, this last week on Street Date.
She's amazing. She is like Miss Bubbles. I love her so much. She's awesome.
She's incredible. Well, you know, and I love it. I had not thought about this till Tim and I were talking. I forgot, Tim, and I thought I knew it all, but now Tim knows everything about all these recordings. I thought I knew it all, but maybe I've just forgot as I've gotten a little bit more, I don't call it older anymore, I call it wiser. She recorded on one of her first records, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I think it was with the group Wild Blue Yonder.
That's right.
And I didn't know that till Tim told me.
And she was known, and that was something she was known for, just like, you know, just a few years after Lady had come out, but she was known, that was something, it was a career nod for her. So,
yeah.
But Reba, we are so excited. Last week, Confessions, one of our favorite records. Now, Lady is my all-time favorite, so I'm sorry I have to say that. But Confessions was finally released digitally on all music platforms.
Yeah.
And Tim and I just wanted to get with you and share a couple of things and get your input. Me coming from the music industry, I mean, I'm a fan, but I'm a friend and a brother to you. But coming from the industry, just seeing how this record came about, I know we have questions we want to ask you. Some of them we know the answers to, but I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to get this record and say, this is so different from the other records that she did up until this point, which I had said that I remember 40 years ago. I remember getting this record and thinking, wow. Now, I had known, I had heard, you know, we didn't have social media back then like we do now. I think I'd probably heard about the painful time you'd walked through from maybe a physical magazine like CCM or Singing News. That seems to me like that's where I first heard it. We didn't have all the stuff that we have nowadays. And so when I got this album, I thought, oh my gosh, this album is so different.
Well, you know,
so
when I suggested even the title, I wanted to call it Confessions. And I remember Ralph Carmichael and some of them looking at me like, you know, because you understand the time, 40 years ago, very different world.
Oh, totally.
I said, and I want to tell my truth. And I remember looking at Mr. Carmichael and saying, and there probably will be some blood on the vinyl. And you know what? He looked at me and he said, I think we may be ready for something like that.
Yeah. Well, this is perfect to start with a couple of the questions that, Tim, you had a couple of great questions that I saw earlier. Me and Tim and I went back and forth about this. And so, Tim, I'd love for you to begin with, I mean, we know Lady as a Child, Dreamin', all those records come out, all of the great Rambo's records. I mean, you were still, and then you went through this tough time. And Tim, I want you to ask about some of the stuff about the Ralph Carmichael and how it led to this record. So I'm going to let Tim take over, and I'm going to.
Before we do that, I want to say this, because some people, we assume everybody knows everything.
Yeah, right.
And I want the people that are watching to know that Dusty Wells, this is my brother. We have been friends. How many years? How old is Stephanie? That's always my gauge, because
she's 30. She's 36.
36 years, because your wife with Lavon was pregnant with Stephanie when we first really spent time together. So 30 years. You know, I'm an only child, and I'd always prayed for brothers, always. And
Yeah.
the Lord sent me you, and the Lord sent me Mark Lowry.
Yeah.
And you really are brothers of my heart. So this is not just me talking to some cute A&R guy at Day One. This is me talking to my brother. And then Tim Dillinger, I want Tim, I know he may get tired of telling, but I don't care. I'm the mom, I'll boss him around. But when Tim was literally just a kid, he first heard the Prodigal record, which was the album right before Confessions. And Tim, can you tell them that story? And ever since Tim was a kid, this one of the sons of my heart. I have a natural son, Israel, and then I have my chosen son, Tim. Tim, do you mind telling that story about when you first heard me sing?
I
Well,
love this story. I love this story, Tim.
The first thing I remember of my life is hearing Just When I Need Him on the radio.
Oh, yeah. Of the Rambos.
It's like weird to, go back, and that voice is like the thing that wakes you up. Like it's the first thing you go back to when you think about where your life started. And I ran into the kitchen to my grandparents and I said, I remember the DJ saying that was the Rambos, Just When I Need Him. And I ran into my grandparents and I said, I want a record by the Rambos. And they took me to the Bible bookstore and they bought me Silver Jubilee and The Prodigal According to Reba.
Wow.
And I also, I said, I knew she was my mom. I mean, in some spiritual sense, as a kid, I just went, that's my mother. Like there was a connection that I felt, and it sounds crazy to many people. But, years later, we found each other.
Yeah.
And the music has been such a, to hear the stories from other people about what these albums have meant to them. I just go, we're like a little tribe. There's a tribe of us who heard these songs and it changed us and it let us know who God is.
Yeah. Well, I love the tapestry part of it because Tim, you guys know how I knew that I was going to work for the Rambos, and I said that to Dottie.
Right.
But then fast forward, all of that, how that wonderfully, so beautifully took place, and I've spent all these years being friends and working for him. But Tim, you would call our office as I had no idea your
12
story.
years old.
11, 12 years old in Atlanta. You'd call the office, and I asked Tim later, I said, was I nice to you? Because I remember him calling, and he said, you were always nice. Because we had a lot of strange people call us at times because Reba and Buck and Dottie were so visible on TBN and stuff. So you would get some strange, odd calls. But I do remember many times Tim calling saying, there again, no social media, what's new out? How's Reba? And he was always so adult. I remember him being like this little old man of 12 years old. I do remember that. And I love how all of that has been so woven together. And Tim, we got to know, he came up here with a friend, and LaVon and I took him around, and we went to, we saw Reba and them all singing somewhere. But I remember there's been times that our lives intertwined through the years. And then when you moved up here.
You know what I keep hearing? I keep hearing Destiny, my daughter Destiny's song in my head. He starts with the end in mind.
One of my favorite songs.
That more every day. Yeah, go Google it, get it. He starts with the end in mind, Destiny McGuire. But anyway, I see that in your life, my life. It's not just, if there's a tribe, I'm not the head of it. We're all just part of this thing. Jesus is the head of this thing. But the way that he connected the dots, and as Mom used to say, follow the breadcrumbs, and helped us all do that. And our lives are so now interwoven that when people ask me, how many children do you have? I just smile and said, do you want me to start counting now? Because how God is connected, but particularly with Tim. And then when people say, are you an only child? And I just smile because I don't feel like an only child.
No.
I feel like I have these brothers, and I have my sister Jeannie. I have, God has placed the orphans. I'm not an orphan, but the scripture says in family. And God surrounded, he surrounded me with you and you with me. And what a blessing that is.
It is, and it's been an incredible journey. And Tim, I mean, I always love to say that I thought I was the greatest Reba fan. But I have to admit, every now and then, you have me beat in so many ways. And I loved when you sent me some questions this week. I thought, Timothy, these are some of the great, because the people who may be watching this, there'll be people who have known Reba, and there's probably some people who are just becoming acquainted with her from the last couple of years. So this record, I cannot say enough about this record. I mean, it was pivotal and so ahead of its time back then, because it came out, like what Reba said, it was the record that she had to make for where she was at her journey. So I want you to ask a couple of those questions and let her talk about it a little bit.
Well, and I think it's important to say too, like, this record came on the heels of really 4 records prior to it that came out back to back to back, like over the course of 4 years. And so to have that kind of output, and this was her 3rd record of 1980. Like, she put out 3 records in 1980, and that's just,
What was I thinking?
that's a lot of creative output. I mean, to generate that much. And so for Confessions to have just as much fire as The Prodigal and just as much fire as Dreamin' shows there's like fuel, there's something under that. And so when Dusty and I were talking about our questions, I was really, and you actually started the conversation with The Perfect Gateway, because I was curious about, you'd been at the Benson Company recording your entire, I mean, since you were 13 when you joined the Rambos. Mm-hmm. And so what in 1979 made you say, I'm going to make a change, and Light Records is it? What was it about Light that made, because I know you had other offers on the table.
Right.
And so what was your
offers. Yeah. Well, first of all, it was just a little bit more progressive thinking, if you want to know the truth. At that time, and don't get me wrong, I loved the Benson Company, which is now Provident. Pop Benson, they were fantastic to me, to our family, and it was a place of growth, and my roots are deep in Southern gospel. But also, the year and a half that I traveled with Andre and the Disciples had great impact and influence on me. And I met a lot of people in California. It was just a different way of thinking. It's not going to say even more liberal. It was just different. It was fresh. It was new. Probably if they'd moved from LA to Nashville, they would have thought that's fresh and new, because they're just a different mindset. But going there, and I had met Ralph, and Ralph was much more open, because, I was like a marked woman. I had gone through, a horrible divorce, even though it was a short-lived marriage, going through that divorce, and it was kind of a marked thing. And I had radio stations do Reba record burning parties, and it was a totally 40 years ago. Think about it. Think about what some of our precious friends that are watching, what they thought about divorce, or what they felt about certain issues that now we've all kind of grown into, because it's affected our families, our friends, our parents. So when Mr. Carmichael and also Ralph said, I see you writing all kinds of things. And he said, I see you, that the musical that had begun, The Lord's Prayer, I see you as a writer, not just as an artist. And he believed so much of me as a poet. When we'd get together for lunch, Mr. Carmichael would say, you better have brought some poems. You better have brought some. And so I always did. I knew that was part of the deal. And so we'd sit there and I would just read my little poems that, a lot of people didn't get. And I'm going to be careful how I say this, but a lot of people, I'm not going to say the character, some people don't enjoy poetry. Even my mother at times was too much of a poet for some groups. Yeah. Oh, that's just too flowery. That's just blah, 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 But I've written poetry my whole life. I've written it when I couldn't even write. And so Mama would have to write my little poems down for me, which is so funny to think about now. But he is a true poet at heart. in addition to be a great conductor and arranger and all the things that he did, but he saw that, he said, Reba, there are things in music that are so much bigger than what you even sing that I see in you. And you know how much I appreciate that, because I
Yes.
was a little girl that, I left school the middle of the ninth grade to go on the road with the Rambos, and finished school by correspondence on the bus, which is almost laughable. So for someone of his caliber to say, I see this greatness in you, that was one of the main things that pulled me to go with Light Records.
Yeah, I love. Well, and they were very much. I mean, they were known for Andre. They
Sure.
were known for the Archers. Were getting
Yeah.
started. Resurrection Band, Res
Resurrection
Band,
Band.
and then one of my favorite contemporary groups, Sweet Comfort Band. Who was
Oh,
so
yeah.
ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
Ralph was, and he was an older man, and that is nothing, but he was such a visionary, and
Right.
it was California thinking. I love that you said that, because it wasn't that it was liberal, it wasn't that it was more free, but it was a little bit different. And even when you look at the record covers,
Yeah.
it was such a fresh. And there again, I'm a fan of Green Tree Records, Benson, heartwarming.
Sure.
But
Real.
it was totally something when I remember walking in the store, and Tim, I'm sure you remember. Well, Tim doesn't remember getting it when it was brand new, but I remember picking this record up and thinking, even the cover, the inside, the pictures that were on the inside of it was so different from those other records. So I knew it was going to be something special.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Well, and CCM said in their review, which we have,
I love it. Yes,
Tim is my historian son. He is the one that is the great historian of the family.
Tim is, he is, I've said this about him. I think record companies need to hire him to do research, because he is amazing.
Absolutely.
The stuff, I knew a lot of the stuff, but I didn't. He's went back and found it, and then brought back these wonderful memories of, it amazes me. It amazes me.
I call it my proof of life. There are things I've
Yeah.
told him. I did this, and he'll go, here's the proof, Mama. Here's the review. Here's the pictures. And I go, oh.
And he's incredible. How he digs in and grabs it all, Tim. So that's awesome.
Well, CCM, I mean, they felt what you said, Dusty, and they said that this was actually less a series of heart-bearing, soul-searching, revelatory material than a telling step in the development of Reba's career as a blossoming songwriter and vocalist. And so they really saw that jump. I mean, it was a major jump.
Yeah.
And you were singing with such, you always have, but it's so, to go from the prodigal and Dreamin', and then say, how can she be singing more? How can it be bigger and more? And you did. I mean, you've always said, there's blood on the wall.
Yeah.
And I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Blood on the vinyl. And there really was. And even some of the original writings, my hand scratching, which is so pathetic. I have to come back sometimes and say, Tim, what was I writing here? It's so good. Because my brain goes so fast, my hand can't keep up. But even with that, literally the tears on the pages, tears on the pages. But I have a new song called I'm Gonna Sing My Way Out. And it's up tempo and fun, but that's really what I was doing this. I was digesting it. I was chewing it. I was ingesting. I was saying, okay, I'm going to learn this lesson. I'm going to learn these lessons, and I'm hopefully going to make them palatable. They'll help somebody else that's walking through hell. And there's no other, that's a nice way of putting it. I was going through hell. But you could see even the way that the recording, the songs, they were almost sequential the way they were written.
Yeah,
really.
You see the journey from here to the very end. You see how it happened, and so anyway. And what's really interesting now, 40 years later, to have gone again through a tough, heartbreaking time, and to go back and listen to Confessions, and I go, oh my goodness, it's as apropos and applicable now as it was back then, to me anyway.
Yeah.
It still speaks. The songs still speak because they're chock full of principles of the word, actually.
you know, I remember when I got the album and I got it home, and I was the type, and LaVon she knows this. I'd always get a cassette and an album. Now 8 tracks were a little bit before my time, just a tiny bit, but I would play that. I remember putting that cassette. I remember where I bought this record. I was in Portland, Oregon. I worked at a Christian bookstore, but we hadn't gotten it in yet. And I was just beginning my musical career. But I got it at a Sears store. Sears used to carry albums. And I remember I bought the album, and then I immediately got the cassette to it. And I remember putting it in the car. And I remember that music to He Never Turned His Back on Me, which was so haunting. And, you know, I had seen Reba just on TV. I didn't have the privilege or honor back then. I'd seen her on a show called Ross Bagley, the Ross Bagley show,
right.
who is still alive, and he always asks me how you're doing. He wrote something this morning on my Facebook, but he was, you know, we always saw her as fresh and bubbly and doing songs like Tomorrowland and The Land of Ooze and Oz, and wonderful songs that got me through some difficult times after I became a Christian. But all of a sudden, here's this gut song, and you're singing. It was such, I've always thought, I mean, I've said this for years, to Dottie, to Destiny, you're the greatest singer that ever lived. I mean, everybody knows me. I have my other favorites.
That's a brother for you.
but I always say, you know, I love Stephanie Busada. I love Nancy Granquist. I love Destiny Rambo. And they all know, but who's your favorite? I love Tanya Goodman. I love Kelly Nealon. I love Karen Peck. I love great singers. But there is nobody that sings like Reba. And so when I heard this, He Never Turned His Back on Me, when I was at the wrong place, oh my gosh, it moved me, Tim. I mean, Reba, that song, and then listen to the whole album, and I knew you had walked through hell. You were walking through hell, I knew there was something back then. My discernment kicked in. I thought, oh my gosh, this is something different. Yeah. But all of the songs moved me so greatly, and I would play it over, because I was going through some tough times back then. I was questioning a lot of stuff. And it was the project that I said, I've told Tim this, it brought me to an awareness of, oh my gosh, there is something so real about being honest with your feelings when you talk to people about it, when you speak about it, when you write about it, when you sing about it. And that's what began my whole thing of why I loved the Rambos. I loved Reba. I loved those Mama Dottie songs. But it was at that point where I realized I love the honesty, the true honesty of what true heart music is all about.
It was interesting the other day. I was reminiscing, listening myself back to Confessions and listening to some of the earlier music, and I started listening to I Won't Last a Day Without Your Love. I'm listening to I Cry Out to You, and what's interesting with I Cry Out to You, I literally I kept going to my knees trying to sing it, because here's the mic and I'm down here. So finally they just put a mic down and I sang it from my knees. I Cry Out to You. I recorded that on my knees. And I just said, let the tears be on there. If there's sniffles, keep them. I don't care, because it was that moment that everything. It was my Hannah. It was my Hannah. God, if you don't bless me, if you don't help me, I can't do anything. I think of the times we worked with Miss Catherine Kuhlman. And the times I've seen her when she didn't know anyone was watching, in the shadows, in the darkness, before she would go out to minister. And I'm not trying to compare maybe to Miss Kuhlman, but Holy Spirit, if you don't show up, I can't do this. I don't even know what to do if you don't show up. It was those kind of moments happen on Confessions, because I knew if He didn't show up, I was toast. It was over. I had to have that touch on this album, because I had to have it on my life.
Well, and that's the anointing too. I mean, we can say all we want, but that's why this album has touched so many people. I mean, for years, I remember Reba, when I traveled with you guys, and we'd go out and you'd do a few of these songs. You didn't do a lot of them, but you'd do a few every now and then. And I remember the people I would watch the audience when you do Because of Whose I Am, or you guys would do A Perfect Heart. I would watch them, and then they would come back, and that's the record. That's the songs they'd want, because it was touching their heart. Oh, I remember those songs were the ones. Everybody loved the other songs, but when it got back to that gut song, those heart songs. So yeah.
Well, that line, Lord, if you mark iniquities, who
Oh,
they stand. I mean, it's just, you can hear all of that. I mean, it's so rich. And those, I mean, to see comments over the past month from people repeatedly. I mean, the comment we have gotten over and over is, this record saved my life.
yeah.
This
Oh,
record
over and over.
brought me through. This record carried me. And
Yeah.
it's because they felt your experience.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and we won't give the name, but there's a famous author who contacted, actually through Tim just recently, he says himself, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a believer, but from way back, Dusty, and was it Reality, Tim, that he first heard?
Reality.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then Tim sent him Confessions. And can you talk about that just a little bit? We won't share the name or anything, but
He was interested in, he's pursuing a particular line of thought about why more people aren't engaged with Christian music as a legitimate art form. And so he had only heard Reality, and he said, 50 years later, this record stands. It still stands. And it was because of the lyricism and the production and the stories. And so we sent him actually the entire discography after that. And he's been, writing pretty consistently since then. We haven't even talked about it. I mean, he's really blown away by the honesty of the lyrics, the vocal mastery, the production. He just keeps going back to how, he wants to know more about how it was accepted. He's really interested in that story. And so the music, in many cases, we hear a lot about music being dated or not being as relevant today. And so to have these kinds of conversations 40 and 50 years after some of these records were produced, and people still being drawn into not just the story of the songs, but the lived experience that created them is really...
Pain is the human experience.
Yes.
We all go through it. I don't care how rich, how healthy, or whatever. This planet is a war zone, and you will get hit by arrows or bullets or whatever in some way into your heart. It happens to everyone. And so the universal pain and the hope that's on Confessions. We didn't just leave you bleeding on the ground.
There was hope.
What I love about Confessions. There is hope, and that was the whole theme so much of Confessions. Yeah, let's tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, let's tell at least most of the truth. We can't tell it all.
That was a Dottie Rambo. That was Dottie Rambo coming out through Reba right there.
You show underneath this hat, you see Dottie a lot of times.
Oh, that's the truth. That's the truth.
But it's the truth. There was and you have to understand, I am a woman of faith. Yes. I believe very much in the power of words. Yep. But I grew up in a system, in a churches, that if you even said, I'm hurting, well, where's your faith? Or if I have a headache, or what scripture are you standing on? And I'm not saying I don't stand on scripture. I do believe in the word. But the Bible says to confess things that are not as though they were, not confess things that are as though they're not. You don't stand there and say, I don't have a headache. Baby, you got a headache. But in the middle of the headache, what word are we leaning on and pulling into this headache that is greater than the headache? But for a long time, the church was, or people I was around, were in such denial. You could not even say, man, I'm having thoughts that aren't my own. I'm considering suicide. You couldn't say that out loud. No, because it was like, oh, you have backslid, whatever. I don't even know what that means anymore.
They'd send you to the altar. They'd send you to the altar.
Send you to the altar, and the
go pray through. Go pray through.
And sometimes the chemicals in your brain are so messed up. If your liver is sick, if your heart is sick, if that organ is sick, people would have more compassion. But if your brain is sick, it's only been really the last very few years that the church is able to say, you know what, there is mental illness. There are
Yeah.
things that can go on. And, thankfully the church now, if you have cancer, we go to a doctor.
That's right.
Right, of course, we combine the natural and the supernatural. But back then, it seemed like there was this stigma that if you were hurting, if you had been wounded, if your heart was in a million pieces, you couldn't say that without them saying, well, where are you with God? And those judging robes, I mean, that I can see right now when I wrote He Never Turned His Back on Me, because there were people that turned their back on me during that time, people I thought were friends. There were pastors that I thought adored me that were calling saying, we'll never have you again, never, And so when you go through that, the good news is after you get through that, you can comfort others with the same comfort you were comforted with. And I believe there's a lot of comfort on confessions. I believe there's so much hope in the Project Confessions.
I remember that was one of the lines of the song. I just felt the Holy Spirit just when you were saying that. When you wrote that line, when I heard that line, when those people were walking by with their robes. And I remember I was in the process of leaving a certain denomination, wonderful people, but I had met a young man that I felt was a strong Christian. He was a friend. I worked with at Sears. I think I've told this story to you, Reba, before. And I saw him reading his Bible every day at lunch. And I would talk to him, and yet I knew he wasn't this certain denomination that I was. And so I was always told that those people were going to hell. And I remember I'd heard this song. I remember as clear as day. And that line, when those people, when they walk by with the robes, and I thought, it started questioning me on my own journey of my own faith, even though I've been a Christian. And I remember thinking, I cannot live and be judgmental. That's God. That is God. That song spoke to me so much. And this kid became a good friend of mine and really helped me understand along with this music of what being a true Christian was. And, I don't want this. I didn't love the sin of the people, but I loved the people and who they were. So.
Right.
Good.
Quick story, and you may have heard this, but every time I feel that judgment thing come upon me with somebody, and we all struggle with that at times, if we're honest, I go back to when I was a young girl before I joined the Rambos, and my family and the Happy Goodman family were good friends, and I was friends with Howard Vestal's children, Vicky and Ricky, and they asked me to go on a 2-week tour with them during the summer. So I went, and I was raised, everything was you couldn't. You could not cut your hair. You couldn't wear makeup. You couldn't wear slacks. A woman couldn't even show her elbow. The sleeves had to be below the elbow. Pretty much everything was sin. And that, if that's your belief, I honor that. But that's the way I was raised. And so I get on the Goodman's bus, and one of the first days we're there, we happened to have a day off. And so we stopped at one of those little mom and pop motel that had the kind of funky looking pools. But anyway, we were the only ones there. There were all the Happy Goodman family and Howard Vestal's children, and I was there. And so Vicky goes in our room. She's like, I'm going to get my bathing suit on. Well, I never had owned a bathing suit. But I'm probably 10, 11 years old maybe. So I decided to go out and sit by the pool. And there was nobody there but that whole family, So I go out, and Vicky and Rick are in the pool, and here comes Sister Vestal, who I adored. She was like a godmother to me. And Vestal, it was hot. Vestal had on a sleeveless dress. She had on a little string of pearls, and she had pink lip gloss on. And I remember just being mortified, like, oh, this is Sister Vestal. And even though she had the hair so high she could touch heaven, but she had that string of pearls, that sleeveless dress, long, mind you, and that lip gloss. And I remember going back into our little room and went into, you remember those Pepto-Bismol pink bathrooms they used to have back in those? Yes. And I remember getting on that bathroom floor, literally sobbing, crying, saying, Jesus, please don't come back right now, because Sister Vestal's sitting out there. God, she doesn't mean it. She's been deceived. And I mean, it's so genuine and so sincere as a child. So I promise you, to this day, if I see somebody and that thing starts to rise again, that judgment, immediately I'm back on the Pepto-Bismol tile.
Yep.
And crying and praying over Sister Vestal, because, you know, and I meant it. But now, you know, as I've grown, as I've lived some life, you know, but I realize we all struggle with that one way or another, whether it's against race, a religion, you know, an orientation. We can all get into that place of judgment.
Yeah.
I can see, Tim, you've got a question. I can see you itching up there.
Come on, Tim. Come on, Tim. Bring those questions on.
Well, I was curious about the conceptualization with all of that in mind, because you were in that, and I noticed on the album credits you credited Judy Gossett with the concept, and so I found some pictures the other day of you and Judy with legal pads working
right
out by a pool, and I was thinking about what were those conversations and how did that, was it an easy decision for you to want to share this piece of you? Or
when you say Judy Gossett, who was my sister for life and my manager for a long time, when Judy and I first met, I was not quite 16, and she came to interview a lot of people at the National Quartet Convention. Her dad at a radio station in Washington State had a show, and she came. And the first time I sat in a little booth, first of all, you have to understand, I was bashful as could be, couldn't hardly look anybody in the face, so insecure. And I sat down in front of this woman, Judy Gossett, and she had shag cut hair. She had leather everything, leather jackets, leather big bags, leather earrings. And I'm looking at her going, what am I? And she was so powerful and so confident. And here I am with my little gardenias in my hair. Her impression of me was I was a diva. My impression of her, you probably don't want to know what I thought of her. I'd never been around anybody like that. A few weeks later, I was on the Disciples bus, just happened to be visiting with Sandra and Andre. This was before I traveled with them all the time. And I got very, very sick one night. I don't know if it was food poisoning, I don't know, very high fever. And I was staying in a room with Sandra, and Judy Gossett happened to be there too. And Sandra, I remember her in the middle of the night calling Judy and saying, Judy, will you come over here and pray for Reba? She's really sick. I think I'm going to have to get an ambulance. And Judy came over, and honey, girlfriend, it was, you talk about storming the gates. I had never heard anybody. First of all, she prayed the word. She prayed with such confidence. She marched around that bed. I mean, and I'm laying there, you know, with tears dripping. And all of a sudden, the Lord turned my heart from thinking she may have been one thing to thinking, what, I want to be powerful like that. I want to know the word. I want to know the Lord like that. And then she saw pitiful me in the bed, and she said, oh, she's just bashful. She's not a diva. She's bashful.
Yeah.
And immediately God knitted our hearts together. So fast forward those years later, and I know I'm going by way of Japan, but I think history of moments is important. So Judy and I, there were no walls between us. She knew where the skeletons were all hid. You know, she knew where the bodies were buried. So when we began to talk, this was, and my manager, and one of the most honest but kind people that I had known. And when she first began to talk to me about it, you know, there was a moment, you know, because when you have radio stations who have had Reba record burning parties, and you're wanting
and you've been booed off stage. You've been booed off stage.
I've been booed off stage, absolutely. Been booed off stage more than once, but one time in particular at a huge event. So when you've gone through that kind of judgment, to bare your soul, to say, this is me, I have hurt in this way. And it was like letting a person in your most intimate bedroom conversations with God and prayers with God. And so she's like, are you ready for this? I really, you know, what do you think? So I'd love to say, oh yes, hallelujah, Lord, send me, I'll go. But I know there was a lot of intense, because you knew before you built that house, you knew it's going to cost you. It's going to help people. There will be a price, and there was a price, but the good so far outweighed the bad, I think. And still now to know that, Tim, you've read so many of the comments, and Dusty, you've read them, the people that say this stopped me from committing suicide. If that did for one person, wow, it was worth everything. It was worth everything.
Yeah. And Tim and I both been so fortunate that we have talked to so many people, artists, writers, and they said this record was a changing point in their life. It touched their lives. I love reading the comments that the people say, and I'm so glad that I got to be out on the road with y'all and see some of the people when they would talk about that project. So I'm thrilled about it. I'm thrilled that it's coming.
I encourage people, if you've not listened to Confession, would you do me? I mean, I would consider it a personal favor. It's not about selling records or anything.
No.
Pick a night that it's quiet, light a candle, and all by yourself. Sit down, get some headphones on, how you listen to music, whatever works for you, and listen from beginning to end. I know that's asking a lot. That's probably close to an hour of somebody's life, 45 minutes, I don't know. But would you, it would be such an honor to me if you would take a few moments of your time, maybe one night when you can't sleep or whatever, and listen from beginning to end. And I would love to know what your thoughts are. I would look, whatever they are. If I hate it, I love it, I'm somewhere in between, whatever. I would love to know if the songs continue to minister to you, because that's, as artists, that's what we long for. It's not about, it's not about all the standing ovations and stuff. It's that little grandma that walks up and says, if it hadn't been for you. Or that single mom that said, when I was ready to throw it all in, when I was ready to walk away from my children, something that don't give up came on. And when you're saying, don't give up through the bitter tears, keep trying. He'll pick you up. He'll bind your wounds. He'll mend your heart. Because we have a promise to cling to. He won't let us go through more than we can bear. And that has happened to me with this one single mom. I can still remember her face. That she was literally either going to kill her children and herself or just walk away from her children. And she said, don't give up. Don't give up. Kept me going. That's what we live for as writers, as artists, as Christians. Something that we do that matters, that helps somebody, on this tough road of life.
Well, and I love what you said a minute ago, how the record, it really does. It evolves from beginning to the hurt, the gut, the junk. And one of my favorite songs on, I might have 8 or 9 favorite songs on it. But my favorite, I always loved He Never Turned His Back on Me. But when you get to the point of Because of Whose I Am, that song, all of a sudden you start seeing that. Okay, you've been broken, you've been down, you've been rejected, you've been cussed out, all of the stuff. But all of a sudden you start seeing Reba writing that song of, it's not where I've been, it's not where I'm going, it's because of whose I am. There's such a hope in that song.
Yeah.
Right. That was written, that was a lot of different, it's like stone soup. You put a little of this and a little bit of that, and it simmers and makes the soup. But one of the major influences of that in Revelations was Richard Roberts. Oral Roberts, Richard, sent us, I don't know how many typewritten pages of a sermon that he'd preached. And in the sermon, he talks about when he was a young boy, right before he went to ORU, the very first year ORU was there, he decided he wanted to go buy a car. Now, he didn't have bad credit. He had no credit because he lived at home. He's getting ready to start college. And so he decided he was going to go buy a car in Tulsa on his own, without using his dad or any of that or his family. And he went to several car dealerships and they're like, son, you have no credit. You cannot buy a car. You just can't, unless you got a whole bunch of cash, which he didn't, you can't buy it. And so finally, the day before school was starting, he went into the final dealership that he could think of. And finally he said, would it help if I told you I'm Oral Roberts' son? And they said, what kind of car do you want?
Yeah. Oh, man.
What car do you want? It was because of whose he was. And when I read that in that sermon, I was writing with Donnie McGuire, and Judy Gossett happened to be there. She didn't write the song, but she was there in the room. And I said, it's because of whose I am. And it was so revelatory to me. It was like, oh my God, it's not about me. It's not about what I'm doing, what I've done. It's because of whose I am. It's my Father. It's about my Father. Jesus would say, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I've come to reveal the Father. It's all about the Father. And when I got that and Donnie went to the piano and started playing, we wrote it in just a few moments time and began singing it immediately. I knew it was a song that had to be out there. But it was the first time I can say, I had that aha light bulb moment of, oh, it's because of whose I am, not
Yeah.
what I am, what I've done.
Well, it's still one of those songs that you put on or you hear somebody sing, and it brings hope. I mean, he's got us. It's hope for every one of us. So
Wow.
What are you thinking up there, Tim? I see that.
I know.
Well, I want to throw out a few names of people that participated in this project, because you've named one of them several times, but she brought a particular contribution to the record. Can you talk about Sandra Crouch as a percussionist?
Oh, well, first of all, Sandra and Andre saved my life. They really did. Many years ago, my dad had gone through, in the early 70s, dad had gone through 5 heart attacks, was told he could never sing again. Everything was shut down with the Rambos, and we thought we would never sing again. And you talk about, it was like a death sentence. And Andre and Sandra had come through town to the National Quartet Convention. They were my friends, and I went to see them. Long story short, Sandra said, get on the bus for a couple of weeks and travel with us and just get away from all these bad reports. And my parents allowed me to go, and my dad was still very sick. And on that bus, the second night I was there, Blinky Williams, that was singing with them, had to leave because her child was sick. And so Andre, after 2 songs, the second night I had been traveling with them, just as a friend, he said, we've got a great singer here with us. I want Reba Rambo to come out and sing the set with us. Thank God I had listened to every record they'd done, and I knew where the breaths and the parts and everything. So I went out with no rehearsal and sang with them, because the only other girl that was singing at the time was Sandra, who sang the low part. So I went out, we never had a rehearsal, and I stayed almost a year and a half traveling with them. But that year and a half saved my life, because every day we had Bible study. The diversity, there was Hadley Hawkins-Smith, there was Harlan Rogers, there was Bill Maxwell, Fletch Wiley, of course, Andre and Sandra, Perry and Billy, all these people. It was such a different culture. When we were off the road, I was standing in Pacoima with Sandra. When I'd go to Papa Crouch's church, a lot of times I was the only white face in the crowd. So it was a whole new culture, a whole new experience. But it was such a formative time for me. And Andre would coach me vocally and say, if you had not been born in a Southern gospel family, I think there's a whole lot more voice there than what you've tapped into. What you've tapped into is great, but there's so much more. And so I credit a whole lot of the things I have learned, especially back then vocally, to Andre. I mean, how awesome is that, to get tutored by Andre Crouch? And not only that, but as a writer, and to bounce some of my, lyrical ideas off of him. And then anyway, but Sandra, when we were home, she would do sessions, and I would get to go with her to Jackson 5 sessions. Hello. I remember the first time I met Michael, and he's kind of this kid, and he loved Sandra, and he'd follow her around and want to help set up her percussion. So seeing how the world, if you will, honored her, and seeing her in those sessions, playing for everybody in his Hound Dogs. I mean, my respect for her, of course, on the stage, it was great, but to see what she could do. So, of course, I was born at night, but not last night. When I was going to do this project, I am calling Sandra Crouch saying, girlfriend, help your sister out here. And she was such a huge contributor to Confessions.
Yeah. And you also had, I think, if you listen to any records from the 70s, then you have heard the Waters sisters, whether you've heard them or not. They've been on almost every record, every huge record. I mean, from Donna Summer to
the whole Waters family are just so tremendously talented. Yeah. But I remember I'd heard them and kept saying, who is that? Because every time I'd hear them, my ears would perk up. So they were on my bucket list. I want to do some projects with the Waters sisters. But my thinking was, I could never, and I remember just like, why not? Sandra was the one that said, just ask them, why not, and to work with them, and to actually, a lot of times, because we use the two, Maxine and, help me, Julia, thanks. And a lot of times they wanted 3 parts, instead of putting it back, they said, just get in here and sing with us. And I'm like, So they would have me in the middle, and I would get to sing with them. And it's a wonder I could sing, because I thought my face would break. I was grinning so big. I was nervous as a hound dog too, but to get in there and to sing with them, what tremendous talents. Many of you have seen them on 20 Feet from Stardom. They are the ones you go, how did so many of this family, how did they not really make it big in the way we think of making it big? They made it big in that they made all these other great artists sound good. But to really, their own artistry has never been recognized, I think, like it should have been. But such tremendous talent and fabulous people, wonderful people.
Wow. What was I've always been curious about, were Lord's Prayer sessions happening at the same time as Confessions, or was Confessions its own little bubble or pocket of time?
Confessions was kind of its own thing, but they were very close in time frame. But the Lord's Prayer, I mean, working with all those tremendous artists and singers, and the Lord's Prayer, and maybe we'll have another conversation about that later, but the Lord's Prayer, Donnie actually came to me with the idea, what if we took and this is, years ago, said, what if we took the Lord's Prayer and broke it up into lines? If we broke it up and each line became a song. And I'm looking at him like, what are you smoking? Neither one of us have ever written a musical. At that time, we hadn't. And he said, well, you're going on tour this weekend. Why don't you work on it and I will? We came back together and we'd broken it up the very same way. As a matter of fact, one interesting thing, the song Give Us This Day Our Daily Bread, we'd both broken it up like that, and we both had heard the Archers singing it.
It's one of the best songs. It's incredible. It's incredible.
But we both had, whatever we were hearing this song, he had written on his notes, I think the Archers should sing this. And I had on my notes, the Archers should sing this song. That was not even written yet. That's what you have to realize. Wow. But it was that year, that span of a little over a year, was one of the most creative. And honestly, I think a lot of it, when you're hurting, when you're wounded, to stay busy in the work. The work was the healing, so much of it, that God used the work. Because if you had too many nights to think things through too much, you could have gone, crazy. So the work was part of the healing.
I want to add this in about the Lord's Prayer, Tim, in case I forget it. We're talking about Confessions, the 40th year. Lord's Prayer is available on every digital music provider, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, everybody. It is available. And I promise you, I tell this, anybody who knows me, it's in my top 10 records of all times, because it is a masterpiece. It won a Grammy, and a lot of people don't know this, but Reba and Donnie, the Archers, Cynthia Clausen, Andre, Sandra, Tremaine Hawkins, Walter Hawkins, B.J. Thomas, who I know still follows Reba, just like the Archers do. They performed a medley of this on the Grammy Awards and got one of the longest standing ovations in the history of the Grammys. And it won. And Barbara Streisand told Reba what a great singer she was, which is still one of my favorite things.
We were in rehearsal all week, and she was there too. She was performing. And it seemed like every time we would rehearse and walk off, she'd be there. And the first time she just the second time she looked at me, she said, great chops.
Okay, think about that.
I don't even know what I said. I was like, thank you. I was such a Vermer, such a fan at that moment. She's amazing.
Well, and I love that I was in Twin Falls, Idaho, at my little apartment, watching it on this old TV. I still remember, and I remember you running out there. And I remember when I went to work, Tim, you're gonna love this. I remember when I went to work for them. Because I was a fan. Even though I loved them and we became friends, but then I got to actually go to their home and work for. And I said, Reba, you still have that outfit? And you know what? She did. She probably still does. I thought that was the coolest thing, that I got to see the outfit she wore to the Grammys and the shoes and everything.
But I remember I didn't like my shoes. And so the day of Grammys, I went over to Bergdorf's, because I could walk from the hotel over to Bergdorf's. and they had the most perfect shoes with butterflies on
With
them.
butterflies. I love it.
And
They're incredible.
they were so out of my budget, but I had stuck some cash back, you know, the Dottie Rambo and me,
They're the Dottie Rambo.
cash back. So I kind of leaned on the truth about what they cost, because I had stuck some stuff back. But what
I
fun
used to,
time.
I loved your mother real fast. I remember one of the funniest things, because Reba, you do this. I remember you used to stick, Donnie would give you cash or different things. We'd be on the road and different things, but you'd get cash and you'd put it in a book or a Bible. But your mother would put it in her pockets of her jackets. She always had jackets. And usually right around Christmas time, she'd say, Dusty, let's go in the closet and see what's in my pockets.
Oh, you're so right. I remember one day, because Dad would like to stick record money in. I remember Sweet Katie that used to work for us.
Oh, yes.
Many years. Miss Katie came out, and Dad had given her a bunch of stuff to take to cleaning. So I haven't worn that suit forever. I need to put that in the cleaning. And she, thank God, would always go through stuff. And she came out, and there was right at $1,000.
Yes,
and she said, Mr. Buck? And she said, that was in your pocket. And, she could,
yes,
could never steal it. She was amazing. She was my mom's best friend.
She was precious.
There's that wad of money. He had totally forgotten about one night of sales.
I love it. I love it. What else, Tim? Ask some. You got such good questions.
Well, there was a lot of buzz at the time. There was a lot of conversation, particularly in mainstream publications, about you having crossover potential.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways you did, because the attention that your records got from mainstream press and the artists that were following your work.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about your crossover in the sense that it happened was that you never had to change your message.
Mm-mm.
Your music remained very faith-based, and that wasn't always the conversation about what crossing over meant. How were you able to negotiate making commercially viable records, because you did, with remaining rooted in a faith-based lyric?
Well, there were 3 different situations that I won't go into that I almost went with another label and did. I mean, it was the day of signing the contract. They'd given me everything I wanted, including creative control. I got to choose the songs. They were giving me a very large bonus, not something to recoup. And I was also guaranteed a spot for the summer on a major secular television show, a musical show. And we had negotiated for weeks. And when it came time, I was driving on my way with the photo shoot ready and going to sign. And it involved, Chet Atkins was involved, Jerry Reed was involved. And just something in me, said, and maybe I'd feel differently now. I just felt like this is not what I need to do right now. So I remember, because there were no cell phones, I remember there was one of those outside phones that you could drive over in your car, and I remember calling Chet Atkins, saying, Atkins, you've worked so hard, and Mr. Jerry Reed, and the lawyers had worked and worked and worked, and I said, if you'll tell me what I need to pay, I'll pay for the lawyer, but I can't do it. And I remember he said, well, what do you want us to do differently? What do you want? I said, I just can't.
Yeah.
I just can't. And that doesn't make me holy at all.
No.
I don't even know if it makes me smart. Maybe I've often wondered, well, where life would have gone. Because Jesus would have walked me down any road.
Yes, he would
have. Good idea. Jesus would have walked me down any road. Anyway, but it was just one of those things. I turned down 2 Broadway shows. Dusty knows this, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't because I was such a godly person. It was timing. It was where my life was at the moment. My marriage was shaky, and I thought, and so there were different things like that. There were opportunities to do totally secular. I'm kind of the Madeline L'Engle school, from Walking on Water. If you haven't read that book, Walking on Water, Madeline L'Engle, you should, because what is sacred, what is secular? you know, it's those are terms we use as the church, that because you know, if you're a plumber, do you have more sacred pipes if you're doing them, or you know, some of the things are just ludicrous the way we think. And both of the Broadway shows were very uplifting. They were good. There was nothing bad about them. One was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat thing.
Yeah.
So it was just, you make decisions in life. And some of the decisions I made was to try to be true to the music, whether it was on Light Records or Benson or Bucket Lid label, if I would have gone with them. I know me, from the overflow of my heart, my mouth's going to speak. Even when I've written with some great country writers, with very few exception, if I'm even going to sit up and we're going to write a country song, you know, it's country songs in reverse. You know, the girl comes home, the truck runs. It's one of those kind of things. Everything turns out for good.
It does. That's so funny.
So Destiny the other day, because I've been writing through another tough time in my life, and she said, "Mom, don't feel like you have to turn every song to where everything turns. Oh, wait, but it's all great now." She said, "I want to give you permission to sit in your pain."
Mm.
You know, and so many of us, if we'd written the book of Job, we would have tried to lickety split, get him out of there. But while he was sitting in the pain, he was learning lessons. I'm not saying God caused the calamity, but I'm saying God speaks in the night. God speaks in the storm. And so, you know, I'm learning to give myself permission to sit in my pain as long as I need to, until. And somebody asked me, how long are you going to be until? I'm at a cabin, you know, out on the lake. I came here for 2 weeks. I'm 7 weeks in. You know, how long are you going to be here? Until I know that, okay, now it's time to go. Because used to, I was always zigzagging, but I'm learning even in writing. Just because I wrote it today, I don't have to sing it today. Mother taught me that. She would write a song and let it simmer for a while because she understood there was a timing for a song. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tim, but it's just trying to stay true to yourself as a person, as a child of God, as an artist, and understand timing, and understand some decisions are good, but they're not the God one for you. And we have to listen to that little voice within and know what's right for us. And God will open up the doors he wants then.
That's good. That's good. Tim, one thing that I loved about Reba, and I loved it about Dottie as well, because I've seen them in many different places and opportunities that they had before. You know, I saw many secular artists, and people look up to them and admire them and talk to them. And what I always loved about Reba and Dottie, especially, both of them, they never wavered their faith. When they taught, they might talk about fashion or family, but there was an element and a beautiful thread of their faith in Jesus in every conversation. You know, I think about this time where Donna Summer was recording Forgive Me. They had all, you know, Debbie Boone was a secular artist, even though she'd come from a faith-based, she had huge success with You Light Up My Life, but she chose some of Reba's songs for her projects. Right. These secular artists, numerous other artists were recording their songs. They didn't have to change anything. They put the heart out there. They put the songs out there. And I love that.
And people know when they're loved. They feel when they're loved. You know, there have been many country artists, for instance, that have called and say, you may not know me, but I'm, you know, blah, blah. Exactly. And would you pray? Yep. Would you pray? Yep. My mama's sick, my child, whatever it is. And people, and they know there's something about it, it's intuitive. That so many of my, I hate to call them fans too, but my partners that have walked along beside me, that have bought the product and everything, they may not, their faith may be different than mine. They may not believe in Christ at all, but they know when they're loved, and they know when they're accepted, and they know when they're not going to get beat up. You know, in my songs, I may have shared where I felt beat up, but my intention was never to beat anybody else up. It was always to encourage, to lift, to pour in the oil and wine. And I think people, they get that. They understand that. And I don't care what label, if they're country, rock, whatever they are, they know when somebody is reaching out with a heart of love. Don't you think that's right, Tim?
I agree. And that's what's always shown through, you know, the music for all of these years. I mean, people still want to hear. And I think it's what people miss about a lot of music now. And it's why I think we're looking back a little bit more, because we need to hear, particularly in these times, songs like Don't Give Up, With a Friend Like You, you know.
I mean, when you think about when you think about the song With a Friend Like You, I mean, laugh and talk over the coffee cup. Think about those lyrics. I mean, it's what we all do. Reba wasn't afraid to talk about any of that stuff, and we'd never heard that in Christian music before back then. I mean, oh my goodness, she said coffee cup in a song, you know, laugh and talk. I remember hearing that song thinking, oh wow. You know, we'd heard songs about heaven and mama, which are all wonderful and good, But I love that it was all of a sudden, it's right there, real in your face, that we needed a friend like him, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this is good.
Well, and later this year,
Yes.
Dream is coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, you know, these 3 records from 1980 will all be available again.
Yeah.
And
And I'm
exciting.
I'm so grateful that the 2 of you helped push through to get the re-release of Lady, the re-release of Confessions, because I've learned I don't fight my battles real well for myself. I can fight better for somebody else. I can fight Mama's battles better than I could mine at times. But I want to publicly say the way that you, Tim, and the way that you, Dusty, have pushed the labels and reminded them, saying, do you realize you still have this? This is not available anywhere unless somebody goes to a garage sale or finds an old vinyl on eBay. And the 2 of you have been the machine, and with help from people like Dan Childers and Ray and Darcy, different ones that have come in as part of the team and helped. But you 2 have been the spearheads to say, it's time for this voice to be heard again. And so I'm believing the whole Reba catalog.
Yes.
Out there.
It will be. Well, and it's still music. I think the thing that we've said, even back when we did the interview with you and Phil Johnson, and what Crystal and you talk about, it's still music that's relevant. It is still songs and ministry and lyrics that still are just as relevant today as they were back then for what people were going through, maybe even more so.
Yeah, some of them were a little, you know, and I don't want to pat me on the back, because sometimes when have somewhat of a prophetic edge, all you do is get kookaburras up your nose because you're trying to blaze this trail. But sometimes, you know, when you're a little ahead of the curve, it's nice to go back now and say, oh, that really was, you know, progressive.
You know, one of the first praise and worship songs, I mean, we talked about Lift Him Up years ago, but the ending of this album, I mean, I remember Gloria and Bill put this on their big praise and worship album, A Perfect Heart. Yes. And it's, to me, I've heard many singers sing this song, but Reba, and I know it's not because I'm just your brother, your vocal on this is so worshipful and so majestic. This song, just the way the orchestra did it and everything about it, it is truly you declaring to God that he has designed a perfect heart. I mean, he really has. And I love how that ends the record of a true praise and worship. Glory to Jesus. This is you, Jesus. This is you.
That song is something to teach us as songwriters. We don't always know the beautiful babies. Donnie and I had written a lot of music, and I'd written with other composers too. And A Perfect Heart was written on a lake early one morning, and we wrote it just thankful hearts to God, and it was just a beautiful experience. But we just called it our little lake song. And we were having our Bible study that we used to have at our offices. Dusty, you were there.
Yep.
Bill Gaither was coming in for a meeting, and he got to the office a little early and kind of got in on the tail end of the Bible study. And we started singing A Perfect Heart in the Bible study, about 40 people there. And Bill came up after and said, my God, what song is that? And I remember telling him, oh, that's just our little lake song. And he said, a little lake song, my foot, we want to record that.
And it was a career song for them. It was a big song for the Gaithers.
For us. Most people thought Bill and Gloria wrote it, which they didn't. But
Yeah.
it was so interesting that so many times, it's kind of like songs have become the precious. They're just
Yeah.
I love precious. And God, and we get so close, we cannot see how beautiful they are. Or we have some that maybe we know why we wrote them, and they're very dear to us. But other people say, that's nice. Worst thing you can say to me about anything I can do is, that's nice. I would rather say, I hate that than to say, that's nice. I want you to have a response that's genuine, So,
Well, I love that. One of the things your mom taught songwriting, you and her, of course, we all know that, two of the greatest songwriters. She always talked about a perfect heart in her songwriting. And, Dottie didn't like, I love that I can say this because I love Dottie Rambo, but she didn't say a lot about other songwriters. She'd talk about the Gaithers, but it was, and Reba, that, it wasn't she just.
Eddie Crosby.
But she'd very rarely, but she'd always talk about a perfect heart being one of the perfect written, God-given songs. Always. And I loved that.
Yeah. If you get a compliment from Mom, if you got one, boy, that was a big deal. Because her standards, because that's the standard she held herself to.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It had to be here for her, because she would struggle. Should it be A or should it be D? Every little word was important. Every little note was important, which it is.
Yeah. Good.
Tim, you got anything else we need to talk about, buddy?
I think we've said it all. With we'll go live again and have another one if there's more.
I love it.
I love it. I love you, boys.
We love you, and friends that are watching this. I know the people who watch this. I know you are friends and fans and partners, and we want to thank you for the support of Reba and her music. I could call so many people's names who I know are going to watch this and share it, because that Reba's music has touched your life, and her life has touched your life. And just like it did,
we have a new website. And we're adding to it all the time, rebarambo.com. So you can go there, and as things happen, and I'm so grateful to Tim and Ray for helping to keep, because I'm not real good with all that. They let me stay out in La La Land where I can write what I write, and they work on the things like the website. So I appreciate that so much.
Well, we're so grateful to everybody for the support. Because when you download the album, when you stream the album, you're letting the label know that this music still matters. So we're incredibly grateful that you're letting them know you want to hear this music from 40 years ago, and there's more that you want to hear. So thank you for letting them know that.
And share it. Share it.
Share it. And I also want to ask for those who love me to continue to pray, because I'm writing a lot of other new music, and to see where all that's going. If I'm writing it for other artists, that's great. If I'm writing it for something for me too, that's also great. So I just want to have my ear to the heart of God, and to hear what he's saying. So I would really appreciate prayer concerning the future, not just the past, but the future.
That's right.
Well, we love you. And as you always say, there ain't nothing you can do about it. This has been fun. Make sure everybody, you check it out. I mean, it's been out now a few days, but check out Confessions. Go get Lady. Go get the Lord's Prayer. There's a lot of great Reba Rambo music out there right now that you can get. But Confessions, and I love what Reba said, and I really challenge you, is take this, get alone at nighttime, and get you a cup of coffee or tea or Coke or whatever you drink, and just listen to this from beginning to end. And I promise you, it'll be a great 45 minutes to an hour that you will say, I needed this. Music touches our hearts like nothing else. So we love you.
Love you.
We love you.
Tim, thanks for all that you do. I love conversing with you. Our texts are always so fun as we talk about Reeb. He'll send me pictures, and I'll send you pictures.
Yes, he's going to have to burn.
That's right. We love you.
I'm just always grateful for you, Dusty, and what you do to bring good music into the world, and for everything you've personally taught me and been a mentor to me. I'm grateful.
That means a lot to me. I love that we get to share her music. I love that we get to take this music that touched our hearts in some dark times, that we get to help take it out to a world that so desperately needs to hear it. We love you and we honor you, and we're thankful that we get to help protect the gift. As your mom always said, help protect the gift. So
That's right.
it's good.
Bye, y'all. We love you.